The world woke to an ordinary morning that quickly descended into chaos. Across the skies, strange shapes appeared, their sleek, metallic bodies reflecting the early sunlight in an eerie glow. At first, people thought it was a hoax, some sort of elaborate space tourism stunt. But as the minutes passed, it became clear this was no joke. The ships, massive, hundreds of miles long, dropped from the clouds like falling stars, their forms twisting and reshaping as they approached Earth's atmosphere. Cities everywhere froze in disbelief as the largest fleet ever seen in human history descended. Radio broadcasts were scrambled, phones overloaded, and the world's media outlets fell silent. Governments scrambled to assess the threat, but nothing could have prepared them for the sight that emerged on every screen. A booming voice, amplified across every frequency, filled the airwaves. "We are the Xanthari," the voice rumbled, as if coming from the very sky itself. "We come as conquerors. Surrender or face your extinction." The voice was cold, unfeeling, and absolute. No room for negotiation, no hope for mercy. The Xanthari had arrived. Panic surged. The streets of New York, London, Tokyo, and every other major city emptied into chaos. People fled in every direction, some scrambling to their homes, others flooding airports in a futile attempt to escape. Governments issued orders for civilians to shelter in place, but the fear that gripped the world's population was palpable. No one knew what these aliens wanted, but one thing was clear: they didn't want peace. As the first of their ships made contact with the ground, towering like gods over the cities, a wave of terror rippled across the planet. Each ship landed with an unsettling calm, releasing towering figures that appeared to be a cross between insectoid creatures and humanoids. Their bodies, armored in dark metallic exoskeletons, reflected their technological might, an intimidating blend of power and precision. Their eyes glowed an eerie purple, with an intelligence far beyond human understanding. It wasn't long before Earth's defense forces mobilized, but it became instantly clear that humanity was not ready for this. The Xanthari's technology dwarfed anything Earth had ever produced. When the first missile was fired from a U.S. military base in an attempt to strike one of the alien ships, the missile was destroyed mid-air with a flicker of light, an energy shield the likes of which Earth had never seen. The alien craft was invulnerable. In a matter of moments, the ship retaliated, unleashing a beam of energy that tore through the landscape, decimating the surrounding area. Entire cities were wiped off the map in a heartbeat, their buildings reduced to rubble. The Xanthari didn't speak again. They simply began to land, and with each new arrival, the fear deepened. Communications were jammed, and cities fell silent as the alien forces began to take control. The governments of the world were powerless to respond, their forces too scattered and ineffective. The military attempted to mobilize air forces, but Xanthari drones, sleek and swift, outpaced any human aircraft, tearing them apart with surgical precision. It wasn't just the power of their weaponry that struck fear into the hearts of humanity. It was the speed with which the Xanthari executed their plan. There was no grand speech, no long debate over Earth's fate. The alien fleet didn't invade in the way humanity had expected. There were no initial demands or gestures of goodwill. The Xanthari simply landed, set up a perimeter, and began their takeover. The world watched helplessly as their cities were occupied. The message from the skies was clear. Humanity was insignificant in the grand scheme of things. As the alien forces moved through the world's major capitals, Earth's military was completely outmatched. The initial human resistance was swift but futile. Fighters and tanks were torn apart by Xanthari energy beams, soldiers vaporized before they could even take aim. Yet despite the overwhelming odds, a spark of something, perhaps stubborn defiance, began to stir within humanity. They hadn't yet given up. In New York City, a young engineer named Rachel Sinclair watched the devastation unfold from her apartment window, her hands trembling as she held her phone. The message had gone viral. Xanthari ships now surrounded the city. A shiver of something deep within her stirred. Rachel had spent years working on experimental technology for the military, technology that could combat seemingly invincible forces. Perhaps it wasn't all lost. Perhaps Earth had one weapon the Xanthari hadn't accounted for: humanity's drive to survive. She wasn't the only one thinking this. Across the world, in every corner of the globe, the response was the same. Earth wasn't going down without a fight. The first shot had been fired. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The world was in chaos, but amid the panic, a quiet resolve began to take root. The initial shock of the Xanthari invasion left cities in ruins and governments scrambling, but humanity's spirit proved to be far from broken. In underground bunkers, makeshift war rooms, and hidden laboratories, scientists, engineers, and military strategists began to gather, each determined to strike back. It wasn't clear how they would win, but one thing was certain: humanity would not surrender. In the days following the alien landing, the world's leaders realized that conventional warfare was pointless. The Xanthari's energy shields and advanced weaponry rendered tanks, bombs, and bullets ineffective. In desperation, a global alliance formed, not between just military forces, but between the best minds from every field. People like Rachel Sinclair, the young engineer who had watched the devastation from her apartment window, now found herself part of a coalition of scientists and engineers tasked with reversing the tide. Rachel's mind raced. The alien tech was alien. No human had ever seen anything like it. But there had to be something, some weakness in their defenses. She pored over any scrap of alien technology they had managed to recover, along with any data they had been able to gather from the brief skirmishes. There was something about the Xanthari's weapons, the way they operated, that suggested a flaw. Meanwhile, in the streets of New York, humanity's resistance was starting to take form. A group of civilians, led by former military personnel and engineers, had established a base of operations beneath the city. The chaos of the invasion had forced people to adapt. People had been forced to scavenge, to take whatever they could from the remnants of the aliens' arsenal. Makeshift explosives, improvised weaponry, and human ingenuity became their tools of war. They knew they couldn't go toe-to-toe with the alien forces, but they could strike from the shadows, disrupt supply chains, and keep the Xanthari on edge. They began hitting smaller targets: alien patrols, supply depots, and communication towers. And they hit hard. One night, a small but determined cell of resistance fighters managed to steal a Xanthari shuttlecraft that had been shot down in a skirmish. The craft, though damaged, still held valuable intel. Inside, they found a strange, cryptic set of markings, something resembling a weak point in the alien ship's power core. It wasn't much, but it was a breakthrough. They knew that if they could exploit that weak point, they could destroy one of the alien ships, maybe even cripple an entire fleet. It was a long shot, but it was something. The information spread quickly. The global resistance sprang into action. Thousands of civilians, fighters, and volunteers from every nation began to work together, pooling resources and knowledge. Rachel Sinclair's team, now fully operational, began developing a new kind of weapon, a device capable of disabling the Xanthari shields long enough for humanity to land a blow. They worked day and night, using every available piece of technology they could find, building from the ground up. It wasn't easy, and the pressure was immense. Every failure felt like a death sentence, but with each success, hope grew. As the days turned to weeks, humanity's counteroffensive began to take shape. Armed with this new technology, an electromagnetic pulse device capable of disabling Xanthari shields for a limited time, human forces launched their first major strike against the invaders. It was nothing short of a miracle. The device worked. For the first time since the invasion began, the Xanthari's energy shields flickered and failed. In that critical moment, a small coalition of human fighter jets, their pilots prepared for the worst, descended on a Xanthari ship hovering over Chicago. The Xanthari ships were enormous, But they were not invulnerable. The humans launched their strike at the core of the ship, targeting the now exposed weak point. It was a gamble, but the resistance hit their mark. The Xanthari ship, previously untouchable, erupted in a fiery explosion. The blast was seen for miles, a symbol of the first victory in what seemed like an impossible war. The resistance roared in triumph as news spread across the globe. Humans had taken down one of the Xanthari's most powerful warships. But the victory came with consequences. The Xanthari retaliated swiftly. Entire sections of Chicago were leveled as the invaders unleashed their fury. The Xanthari had underestimated humanity's ability to fight back, and they weren't going to make that mistake again. The battle had just begun, and the Xanthari would not let their loss go unpunished. Yet, despite the Xanthari's overwhelming retaliation, humanity had proven something crucial. They were not the helpless species the Xanthari had assumed. This was just the beginning of something much bigger. The Xanthari had made the fatal error of thinking Earth would be an easy conquest, but now humanity had tasted victory. They would never stop fighting. For the first time in the war, the Xanthari were faced with a new reality. The human race was far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. And humanity, they had only just begun. The world had not been the same since the victory over the Xanthari ship in Chicago. Humanity's first taste of success had ignited something deep within the human race, a spark that no alien force could extinguish. The victory was not just a military triumph. It was a psychological breakthrough. The Xanthari, with all their advanced technology and superior firepower, had been brought to their knees by the very species they had deemed primitive and unworthy of notice. The news spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the globe, galvanizing the resistance and sparking a wave of rebellion that swept across the earth. In the cities, the streets were no longer filled with just panic. They were filled with purpose. People who had once fled in fear now stood with their backs straight, ready to fight. In the places humanity had once been scattered and isolated by the chaos of the invasion, there now existed a network, an underground force of resistance cells, from the smallest town to the largest metropolis. These cells were organized, not just by military strategists, but by ordinary people, mechanics, doctors, farmers, and teachers, who understood that Earth's survival depended on their ingenuity, resourcefulness, and sheer determination. Rachel Sinclair, now a key figure in the global resistance, spent her days coordinating efforts between the resistance cells and working on new technologies to give humanity an edge. Her once quiet life as an engineer had transformed into a whirlwind of design, invention, and planning. She knew every hour counted. Every breakthrough, every small success, could mean the difference between victory and extinction. Her latest project was the development of an EMP cannon, one that could be fired from human aircraft and ground forces, temporarily disabling the Xanthari shields. The technology was crude compared to the Xanthari systems, but it was the best humanity could do with what little they had. If it worked, it could give their forces the opening they needed to take down more ships, but it also meant they'd be exposed to retaliation. Rachel knew the risks, but also understood the stakes. Meanwhile, in the heart of the Xanthari-controlled zones, the resistance continued to hit hard. Their tactics were unconventional, but they had the advantage of surprise. Xanthari patrols, once an impenetrable force, were now being ambushed by humans who knew their home turf better than any invader. A group of resistance fighters in Paris had used the city's vast underground tunnels to outmaneuver Xanthari forces, sabotaging their supply lines and stealing weapons. In the heart of Brazil's jungle, a band of guerrilla fighters launched hit-and-run strikes, destroying Xanthari surveillance equipment, throwing their enemies into disarray. But it wasn't just the big cities where humanity showed its resilience. In remote villages and small towns, people were crafting weapons, building traps, and digging into the earth, readying themselves for whatever came next. Children were taught how to handle weapons, how to avoid detection, how to fight for the survival of their families. Across the globe, the human race was becoming something it had never been before, unified, resourceful, and willing to fight back with every ounce of its spirit. The Zinthari, for all their might, had underestimated the most crucial aspect of humanity: the will to survive. It wasn't their technology, their fleet, or their firepower that had kept Earth standing. It was the human drive, the deep, instinctual need to protect their home, their loved ones, and their way of life. The Zinthari might have come with their overwhelming force, but they could not account for the unpredictability of the human spirit, and humanity's determination was paying off. The Resistance's strikes were growing bolder, their tactics more refined. In Moscow, a daring team of fighters infiltrated a Zinthari command center, managing to hack into their communication systems. In the process, they learned something crucial. The Zinthari were starting to grow nervous. Their once sure plans were faltering, and despite their technological superiority, they found themselves on the back foot. Rachel, now more determined than ever, worked with her team to refine their EMP cannon. It was nearly ready, and the world's military leaders had decided on a bold move. With the Zinthari distracted by humanity's increasing attacks and growing unity, the human forces were preparing for their largest assault yet: a simultaneous strike against several of the Zinthari's most heavily fortified positions, using the new EMP technology. But even as the resistance was mobilizing, they knew they were not just fighting an alien empire. They were fighting for their very identity. Earth had become more than a battlefield. It was a symbol of humanity's indomitable will to overcome. Each victory, no matter how small, was proof that humanity was not the underdog. It was a force to be reckoned with. In secret bunkers, in hidden resistance cells, and in the minds of everyday people, the words echoed, "We will not go quietly into the night." The Zinthari may have thought they were invincible, but humanity had already begun to change the course of their invasion. As Rachel looked out across the resistance camp, watching the humans prepare for the next strike, she felt a sense of awe. These people, ordinary people, had become the world's greatest hope, and together they would prove that even the most advanced empire in the galaxy had underestimated the power of humanity's will to survive. The battle was far from over, but now it was humanity's fight to win. As humanity's forces pushed forward, it became increasingly clear that their strength lay not in sheer numbers or brute force, but in their remarkable ability to adapt and innovate. Where the Zinthari relied on their superior technology and overwhelming firepower, humanity's true advantage was its creativity. The Zinthari had underestimated how quickly Earth's inhabitants could harness their ingenuity, taking alien technology, repurposing it, and crafting new solutions from nothing. Rachel Sinclair's team had made significant progress on their electromagnetic pulse (EMP) weapon, which had successfully disabled Zinthari shields during previous attacks. The resistance was no longer just hitting small targets. They were starting to plan large-scale operations. But this was only the beginning. Humanity's engineers, many of them working in underground bunkers and hidden labs, had begun to reverse engineer alien technology on a much larger scale. The weapons, though crude compared to the Zinthari's sleek, impenetrable arsenal, were becoming increasingly effective. Rachel's latest breakthrough, a new type of EMP device capable of affecting a much larger area, was ready for testing. It had the potential to disable entire Zinthari fleets at once, if they could manage to get close enough to their ships. But the challenge was massive. The Zinthari were not only technologically advanced, but also had an overwhelming presence in the air. The Resistance knew the stakes. If they could get this new weapon into the heart of the Zinthari's control systems, they might cripple their enemies for good. But there were still risks. Humanity's fighters, although they had learned to adapt and fight on their terms, still lacked the precision and raw power of the Zinthari forces. The Zinthari had their own advanced fighter jets, drones, and armored soldiers, each of them more lethal than any human counterpart. The Resistance could not match the Zinthari in direct combat, but they could still outwit them. And that's exactly what they planned to do. In the deserts of Africa, a group of Resistance engineers, along with military tacticians, worked furiously on a new project: a hybrid vehicle designed for stealth operations. Using a mix of scavenged Synthery tech and human ingenuity, they crafted an aerial drone with cloaking capabilities. It could slit through Synthery patrols undetected, delivering EMP blasts directly to the heart of their command centers. The mission was risky, but it was humanity's best shot at creating the opening they needed to launch their larger assault. While Rachel's team continued working on their EMP weapons, another key player in the resistance, General Marco Duran, was leading a group of seasoned human fighters in a daring raid on a Synthery base in the Arctic Circle. The resistance had discovered that the Synthery were using the frozen tundra to conduct secret research, developing new, devastating weapons that could shift the war in their favor. Duran's team was tasked with sabotaging the base before the Synthery could deploy these new weapons. The operation was an intricate web of deception, using the harsh, unforgiving environment to their advantage. Duran and his team infiltrated the base, using advanced human technology to hack into the Synthery's security systems. They managed to disable several of their research labs and destroy key supply chains before being detected. But in the chaos that followed, one of their soldiers, Lieutenant Kara Green, stumbled upon something extraordinary, a Synthery prototype for a new type of energy shield, one that could potentially withstand even the most powerful EMP blasts humanity had developed. Green's discovery sent shockwaves through the resistance. They now had a target. They needed to stop the development of this shield at all costs. But how? The Synthery had already begun mass production in several hidden facilities around the world, and if they succeeded in deploying these shields, humanity's weapons would be useless. This new threat spurred an all-out race against time. The Synthery, realizing the extent to which humanity had adapted and innovated, began to grow more aggressive. They increased their patrols, strengthened their shields, and launched counterattacks on human strongholds. But for every blow the Synthery struck, humanity responded in kind. They found new ways to hack into alien communication networks, shutting down critical systems at the most inopportune times. They built stronger weapons and forged new alliances. The resistance movement, which had once been a loose network of desperate survivors, had evolved into a unified force, connected by a shared goal: freedom. Humanity's ingenuity was not just about creating weapons or technologies. It was about adaptability. Where the Synthery saw an unstoppable force, humanity saw an opportunity. Every setback, every failure, led to an opportunity to learn and grow stronger. And with each victory, the Synthery were forced to acknowledge the same harsh truth. Humanity was not just surviving. It was thriving in the face of annihilation. In underground bunkers, resistance cells worked together, sharing knowledge and resources. Where once there had been fear and uncertainty, there was now an unstoppable drive. The human race had become a relentless engine of innovation, using the resources at its disposal to stay one step ahead of its alien adversaries. Humanity had gone from being the hunted to the hunters, and the Synthery knew it. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the invasion began, it felt like humanity might just have a chance to win. As the days passed, the war between humanity and the Synthery raged on, but something had shifted. The tides were no longer flowing solely in favor of the invaders. With each passing battle, humanity's resistance grew more coordinated, more skilled. The Synthery, once so sure of their superiority, were beginning to feel the pressure of a war they had not anticipated. In the heart of the Resistance's underground command centers, Rachel Sinclair and her team worked tirelessly on the new EMP technology. The human forces had already caused significant damage to the Synthery fleet, but it was a temporary victory. The new shields the Synthery were developing threatened to make humanity's technology obsolete. Rachel knew this was the moment to strike decisively before the Synthery could deploy their new defense systems in full force. The EMP cannon had proven successful in disabling smaller Synthery ships, but now the Resistance needed to target their motherships, massive, city-sized vessels that served as the central hubs for the alien fleet. These ships were far more advanced, far more powerful, but humanity had learned from its past successes and failures. The plan was ambitious. A coordinated strike from multiple fronts, using their new EMP technology to temporarily disable the Xanthuri's most powerful ships. But it was no easy task. The Xanthuri had adapted as well. Their ships were heavily guarded, and their fleet had grown ever more formidable. They had begun deploying new weaponry designed to neutralize humanity's EMP strikes. The window of opportunity was rapidly closing, and Rachel knew the Resistance's efforts needed to be swift and precise. Every failure would be catastrophic. The cost of miscalculation was too high. Meanwhile, across the globe, the Resistance forces were preparing for the largest and most dangerous mission they had yet undertaken. General Marco Duran, now a revered figure among the Resistance, was tasked with leading a coalition of human forces into the heart of the Xanthuri-controlled zones. His mission was to disrupt the Xanthuri's command centers and prevent the alien race from activating their new energy shields. The operation, known as Operation Dawn, would require coordination between air, ground, and cyber forces, with multiple cells acting simultaneously to ensure that the Xanthuri could not rally in time. The plan was simple in concept but brutal in execution. Human forces, armed with EMP technology and their relentless resolve, would strike at the heart of the Xanthuri's defenses. The goal was to disable the Xanthuri's communications, disrupt their command centers, and incapacitate their fleet long enough for a final decisive strike. But the Resistance forces knew that it would be a one-way mission for many. Duran's forces, moving quickly through dense urban landscapes and uncharted wilderness, faced both alien drones and the remnants of Xanthuri forces that had been battered by previous strikes. Yet they continued onward, navigating unfamiliar terrain, fighting not just against invaders, but against their own fear. The spirit of humanity's fight had been rekindled, and now they were pushing back with everything they had. In the skies above, human pilots, equipped with cloaking technology, slipped past Xanthuri patrols, creating chaos and confusion among the alien fleet. They dodged incoming fire, launching precise attacks on key targets, fuel depots, supply lines, and shield generators. With each successful strike, their numbers seemed to grow. A sense of unity and purpose permeated the Resistance. Earth's people, who had once been fragmented and uncertain, now fought as one. But as the final wave of fighters prepared for the ultimate assault on the Xanthuri motherships, the aliens revealed a terrifying new weapon. From deep within their command centers, the Xanthuri unleashed a new type of energy cannon, massive beams of concentrated plasma that could obliterate anything in their path. These weapons were designed to neutralize the EMP cannons before they could be used to disable the ship's shields. It was a desperate move, one that could turn the tide of battle back in the aliens' favor. The Resistance wasn't ready to give up, though. Duran and his forces pushed through wave after wave of Xanthuri counterattacks, leading the charge as they drew closer to their target. The EMP cannons, though fragile and prone to malfunction, were their only hope of stopping the Xanthuri from deploying their devastating new weapon. Rachel had anticipated this turn of events. She and her team had spent days developing a countermeasure, a device that could block the Xanthuri's plasma beams long enough for the EMP cannon to hit its target. It was an untested prototype, but it was their only shot. As Duran's forces infiltrated the heart of the Xanthuri-controlled base, Rachel's team launched their countermeasure. The results were immediate and explosive. The Xanthuri's plasma beams were blocked, and the EMP cannons fired, hitting their mark with incredible precision. One by one, the Xanthuri motherships fell, their once impenetrable shields flickering and collapsing. The Resistance had scored a decisive victory. But even as the Xanthuri fleet began to crumble, their retaliation was swift. The skies filled with alien ships descending into battle, launching a final desperate strike against humanity. The war was far from over, but for the first time, humanity had shown that it could stand toe-to-toe with the invaders. As the Resistance regrouped, Their morale was higher than ever. The world had tasted victory, and now there was no turning back. Humanity would no longer be the underdog. It was time to finish what had been started, to reclaim their planet, and show the Zinthari that no force in the universe could crush the human spirit. The explosion of the Zinthari motherships sent shockwaves through the enemy ranks. For the first time since the invasion, it was clear that the tide was turning. The once mighty alien empire, which had thought humanity nothing more than an insignificant speck in the cosmos, was now facing a foe that fought with the resilience of a species that refused to be crushed. Despite the destruction, the Zinthari were not finished. Their remaining ships regrouped, ready to launch a counteroffensive unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Yet the resistance, emboldened by their success, began to rally forces from all corners of the earth. From the scorched deserts of the Middle East to the frozen tundras of the Arctic, humanity had proven that it could adapt, learn, and overcome. The battlefield, once dominated by the aliens, had begun to shift. But there were still massive obstacles ahead. The Zinthari's core leadership, hidden deep within their most secure command center, had been unscathed by the recent EMP strikes. They still held the power to rally the remaining forces and mount a campaign to wipe out humanity once and for all. If the resistance was to win, they needed to dismantle the Zinthari command structure and neutralize the core leadership. General Marco Duran knew this was the key to breaking the Zinthari's will. He had proven time and time again that the resistance could disable their weapons and ships, but it was their leadership that was holding the aliens together. As long as the Zinthari remained united under their high command, humanity's victories were nothing more than temporary skirmishes. The final battle would have to be fought at the heart of their empire. Rachel Sinclair's team, working in tandem with military tacticians, had begun developing new, more precise technologies that could breach the Zinthari's heavily fortified strongholds. They had perfected smaller EMP devices, pocket-sized units that could be dropped directly into alien command centers. These units would disable not only the shields but also the aliens' advanced communication systems, allowing the resistance to cripple their ability to coordinate. Duran's new mission was clear: penetrate deep into the Zinthari's inner sanctum and deploy the EMP devices at the heart of their power. But getting there would be no easy feat. The Zinthari's defenses had become increasingly sophisticated. Their motherships, now well defended by layers of energy shields, were equipped with a new kind of automated defense system, one that could detect human technology and neutralize it before it could even come close. The resistance would have to go in blind, using every tactic they had learned over the course of the war to infiltrate the Zinthari's central stronghold. The plan, known as Operation Eclipse, was risky, perhaps even suicidal, but Duran knew it was the only way to end the war. Rachel, who had become the operation's chief architect, worked day and night with her team, improving the EMP devices and refining their delivery methods. The plan would require small, agile teams of human soldiers, scientists, and engineers who would slip past Zinthari defenses, drop the EMP devices at key locations, and escape undetected. Timing would be crucial. If they didn't strike at exactly the right moment, the Zinthari would activate their countermeasures, and humanity's last hope would be lost. As the resistance began to prepare for the operation, humanity's resolve reached its peak. The global network of underground cells, now better coordinated than ever, began to mobilize. Even those who had been passive or fearful during the early days of the invasion were now rising to the cause. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming their home, their future, their very identity. For humanity, this was a fight for everything. But there was a new kind of pressure on the horizon. The Zinthari, too, had learned from their mistakes. They had begun to adapt their strategies, using human technology against humanity. Zinthari spies had infiltrated some of the Resistance's communication networks, feeding false information and sowing distrust among key commanders. In some parts of the world, resistance cells had turned on each other, unsure of what was real and what was a Zinthari manipulation. It was a silent war, one that threatened to unravel the fragile unity the Resistance had worked so hard to build. Despite these internal struggles, General Duran and Rachel knew that they could not afford to wait. The time for hesitation was over. The final battle was approaching, and every soldier, every scientist, and every civilian who had joined the cause was ready to make the ultimate sacrifice. The Resistance had grown from a desperate, scattered group of survivors into a unified, unyielding force. The final assault would begin soon, and the stakes had never been higher. If the Resistance failed, humanity would be consigned to the same fate as countless other civilizations that had fallen to the Xanthuri's merciless advance. But if they succeeded, if they could dismantle the Xanthuri's leadership, then Earth would no longer be a conquered world. It would be a symbol of resistance, of defiance, and of the unbreakable will of humanity. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with danger and sacrifice. But one thing was clear: humanity had made its mark on the galaxy. The Xanthuri had awoken a sleeping giant, and now that giant was preparing for its final reckoning. The war was not yet over, but humanity's fight for survival was about to reach its most critical moment. As humanity readied itself for the final push, the stakes had never been clearer. The Resistance had come a long way from the frightened, scattered groups that had first taken up arms against the Xanthuri invaders. Now, they were a force to be reckoned with, unified, relentless, and ready to strike at the heart of the alien empire. General Marco Duran, along with Rachel Sinclair and a handful of trusted operatives, had spent the last few weeks preparing for what would be humanity's most daring assault yet, Operation Eclipse. The plan was simple in theory but complicated in execution. A small, elite team would infiltrate the Xanthuri's heavily fortified Central Command Center, located deep within the heart of the Xanthuri-controlled territory. The goal was to deploy the new EMP devices at the critical communication hubs and energy sources, cutting off the Xanthuri's ability to coordinate their remaining forces and disable their most advanced technology. If they succeeded, the Xanthuri would be left in disarray, unable to mount a cohesive defense. But failure meant certain death, not only for the operation's participants, but for the entire human resistance. Rachel had been working around the clock to fine-tune the EMP devices, ensuring they would work perfectly in the hostile environment of the Xanthuri stronghold. She knew that if even one of the devices failed, the entire mission would be compromised. Despite the mounting pressure, Rachel remained focused. Her mind was clear, driven by the knowledge that this was humanity's last chance. The alien invaders had never fully understood what it meant to be human. They had underestimated the will of the species, their creativity, their resourcefulness, their refusal to bow to any conqueror. This final mission was the culmination of everything the Resistance had fought for. On the eve of the operation, General Duran gathered his team. Each member of the elite strike force had been handpicked for their skills and their resolve. There was Lieutenant Kara Green, whose knowledge of covert operations had saved countless lives in the past. Sergeant Tobias Hunt, a skilled marksman and explosives expert who had earned a reputation for taking down impossible targets, and Captain Aisha Patel, a cyber warfare specialist who had helped turn the tide in several key battles by infiltrating Xanthuri communication systems. As Duran addressed the team, his voice was steady but filled with the weight of the moment. "We've come a long way, but this is it," he said. "This isn't just about fighting anymore. This is about ending the war. We have one shot at this. If we succeed, humanity will take back its planet. If we fail, it's over. But I know all of you. We've faced worse odds before. We've lost friends. We've seen the worst this galaxy has to offer. But we're still here. We'll get it done." There was no fear in their eyes, only determination. For each of them, this was more than just a mission. It was the culmination of everything they had lost, everything they had fought for. It was a fight for their future, for the future of every human on Earth. The operation began under the cover of darkness. The Resistance's forces, now well coordinated, launched a series of diversionary strikes across the planet to draw the Xinthary's attention away from their true objective. With the enemy distracted, Duran's strike team made their way toward the heavily defended Xinthary stronghold. The journey was perilous. The team had to traverse hostile landscapes, infiltrate alien-controlled cities, and avoid detection by Xinthary patrols that had grown more vigilant with each passing day. The alien defenses were formidable. Automated turrets, energy barriers, and surveillance drones designed to spot any intruders. But humanity's ingenuity had always been its greatest asset. Thanks to the stealth technology they had reverse-engineered from captured Xinthary drones, the team moved undetected through the alien defenses, slipping past obstacles and neutralizing threats with precision. As they neared the command center, they encountered the first major challenge, a heavily guarded Xinthary blockade, stationed at the entrance to the central facility. The blockade was made up of elite Xinthary soldiers, augmented with advanced weaponry and combat enhancements. For the first time, Duran and his team hesitated. They knew they couldn't risk a full confrontation. A prolonged firefight would alert the Xinthary to their presence and doom the mission. It was Kara Green who suggested a solution. "We can't fight them head-on, but we can outsmart them," she said, her voice calm. "I know their patrol schedules. If we hit them from the flank, we can take them down silently." With Kara's plan in motion, the team moved quickly and efficiently, taking down the Xinthary guards one by one, using their enhanced skills and the quiet tools they had developed. The operation was a success, and they made it inside the command center. Once inside, time became a blur. Each member of the team moved with purpose. Tobias set charges to disable the energy systems, while Aisha hacked into the Xinthary's central communication network, scrambling their signals and preventing reinforcements from reaching them. Rachel, with the help of her fellow engineers, deployed the EMP devices at key locations, ensuring that they would cripple the alien infrastructure once activated. But just as they were about to leave, disaster struck. The Xinthary detected their presence and locked down the command center, trapping them inside. The countdown to detonation had begun, but the team was pinned down by overwhelming Xinthary forces. The final moments of their mission were a blur of fire, tension, and desperation. Yet, as the EMP devices activated, a massive surge of energy spread through the facility, disabling the Xinthary's shields, communication networks, and weapons systems. The Xinthary had been dealt a crippling blow, but there was no time to celebrate. The team knew that they had just one final window of opportunity. They had to escape the facility, alive, before the alien reinforcements could arrive. The EMP surge swept through the Xinthary command center like a tidal wave. Sparks flew, and the alien machinery sputtered and ground to a halt. Communications went silent, and the once impenetrable shields that had protected the Xinthary from human attacks flickered out of existence. For a moment, there was an eerie stillness, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The Xinthary's towering war machines, once symbols of their superiority, lay crippled and helpless, their systems dead. Yet the victory was short-lived. The team had no time to bask in the success of their mission. Alarms blared, and the heavy doors to the command center slammed shut, locking them inside. The Xinthary's automated defense systems, still operational despite the EMP, began to swarm around them. Deadly energy beams and drones activated, and the team found themselves trapped in a rapidly closing noose. "We've got to move, now," Duran shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The exit is on the west side, but we'll need to fight our way out." Sergeant Tobias Hunt, his face a mask of determination, readied his weapon and nodded. "We're not going down without a fight." The team moved as one, knowing that every second was precious. They were deep in the heart of the Xinthary stronghold, surrounded by alien technology and walls that seemed designed to keep them in. The EMP had disabled most of the security measures, but not all. They fought their way through narrow corridors, evading deadly traps and engaging in swift, calculated firefights with the alien drones that swarmed toward them. With every move, they knew the clock was ticking, and the enemy reinforcements were only moments away. Kara Green, ever the strategist, led the charge. The west side's blocked. We'll need to reroute through the lower levels. They won't expect us to take the tunnels. The team pivoted, making their way down into the sublevels of the command center. The corridors here were narrow and winding, a maze of alien architecture designed to confuse any intruders. But humanity's adaptability had proven time and time again to be its greatest strength. As they moved deeper, Aisha Patel hacked into the control systems of the Zinthuri, using their own technology to unlock doors and disable traps. It wasn't easy. The Zinthuri had thought of everything. But Aisha had proven herself to be just as relentless as her fellow soldiers. "We're almost there," Rachel Sinclair said, her voice tight with urgency as she checked her equipment one last time. The EMP devices had done their job, but the risk wasn't over yet. The team had to get out alive, and they knew it wouldn't be easy. As they neared the final exit, they encountered their biggest obstacle yet. A platoon of elite Zinthuri soldiers, enhanced with the latest combat technology, appeared at the end of the corridor. These were the Zinthuri's best, armed with devastating plasma weapons, and fast. The resistance had no choice but to fight, even though the odds were now against them. Duran gave the order, and the team spread out, taking cover and returning fire. Tobias unleashed a volley of grenades that sent several of the Zinthuri soldiers scrambling, while Kara moved swiftly, using the element of surprise to disable the aliens' automated defenses. Aisha, in the midst of the chaos, dropped to a knee and tapped into the Zinthuri's mainframe, triggering a local shutdown of their most dangerous weaponry. The battle was fierce, blinding flashes of energy. The sound of weapons fire and the harsh alien shrieks filled the air as the team fought tooth and nail to stay alive. Duran's heart pounded as he watched his team, each of them a force unto themselves, working together with lethal efficiency. There was no time to waste. Every minute they spent fighting here was one more minute the Zinthuri would have to regroup. At last, the team managed to push through, finally breaking through the alien forces and reaching the surface. The outside world had become a war zone. Zinthuri ships scattered across the horizon, burning and collapsing as the EMP wave continued to disable their fleet. Humanity's forces, in what seemed like a final act of defiance, had launched their own assault, taking advantage of the chaos to destroy the Zinthuri's remaining military presence. "We're not done yet," Rachel said, her voice strained but resolute. "We've done our part. Now we need to ensure the rest of the world sees this through." General Duran, his face smeared with dirt and sweat, nodded. He looked back at the ruined Zinthuri stronghold behind him, the alien empire's heart cut to the core. "This is just the beginning. We've shown them that humanity can't be beaten. But this fight, this war, isn't over until we've freed every inch of Earth." As the resistance team retreated to the rendezvous point, they knew that the final reckoning was at hand. The Zinthuri, despite their technological superiority, had underestimated humanity's will to survive. And now, with their command structure crippled and their fleet in disarray, the invaders knew the human race was no longer the underdog. The war was not over yet, but humanity had struck a blow that would echo across the stars. The Zinthuri had awakened a force they could not control, a force that would haunt them for as long as they remained in the galaxy. The battle that had once seemed impossible was now the beginning of humanity's rise. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting to reclaim their future, their world, and their place in the cosmos. And no force, no empire, no invader would stand in their way.